Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is SUKKAH Lamites. We begin at the 2 dots, which are 6 lines from the top of the Amid. The Mishnah discussed the Kriyas HaHalal. Now we have one parak within Halal which has many psukim repeated. It's the parak Kuf Yud Ches of Tehillim. So it begins in the middle of Halal, begins with the words Hoidul Hashem Ki Toiv, then Yomer No, etc., all the way to the end of Halal, where you have Hoidul Hashem again. So it's really one parak. In Halal we divide it, but it's really one parak. And most of those psukim actually repeated. So the concepts are said twice. Yimin Hashem Reimeima, Yimin Hashem Oisachayil, etc. The way you sing a song, you repeat, you emphasize, you get into it. But there are some psukim that were not doubled. However, the Mishnah told us there was a makom where they had a minhag to be kaifel, to repeat those psukim. So if you're living in a place where they have a minhag lichpel, then go along with the minhag. Makom shenagu lichpel, then you as well should be kaifel, should repeat those psukim as well. We're speaking about those last psukim, starting from oitcha all the way to the end, which are really only said once in the Tehillim itself. But in order to match it with the rest of the psukim, they would have a minhag to repeat those psukim as we actually do today. Tana, we learned in a brayse, Rabbi kaifel badvarim. Rabbi doubled. He repeated some of the psukim, and was speaking actually only from Ana Hashem onward. We learned yesterday that everybody had the minhag to say Ana Hashem twice. This would teach them an important lesson regarding the concept of a katan reading for you. You have to repeat it after him. Ana Hashem Hatzlichna would be repeated because it would teach us about doubling psukim. We learned this yesterday. So once you started saying double from that point on, from Ana Hashem on, Rabbi added everything else all the way to the end of the parak. So all psukim would be doubled. Rabbi Lazar ben Parta Moisif Badvarim, he added more things. What does that mean? My Moisif, what would he add on top of Rabbi? Amar Abayi Moisif Lichpel Moitchol Mata. So he began his repetitions not from Ana Hashem onward. He went all the way back to Oitcha Kanisani, as we do today. That's why everything matches. All the psukim are doubled. The Mishnah spoke about a minhag hamokim levarich. So if the minhag in that place was to make a bracha on halal, yivarich, go along with the minhag. Which bracha are we speaking about? Before halal or afterwards? Amar Abayi leishano l'achrav. This that the Mishnah says that bracha is dependent upon minhag, that's the bracha following halal. Yahlucha Hashem Elokeinu, ending with melech muhulal batesh bachas, as we do today. So that's minhag dependent. Aval of mitzvah levarach, but the bracha before halal, everybody does that. That's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to make a bracha before you say halal. Just like you make a bracha before any other ma'aseh mitzvah. Halal is no different. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, kol mitzvahs kulan, mivorach alein, oiver lasiyasin. You meant to make a bracha before any mitzvah that you do. So oiver means in advance. The bracha precedes the mitzvah. Why does the Gemara use the word oiver, says the Ritva, to indicate that the bracha is meant to be recited very close to the Ma'aseh mitzvah. It's not enough that it's done in advance, it's done before. You're not meant to have a hefsek between the mitzvah and the bracha. That's why the Gemara chooses the words oiver lasiyasan within close proximity to the mitzvah. Umay mashmadai oiver lishna de akdumihu. What do we find that the word oiver indicates advancement, indicates before. The Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak T'chsiv Vayaratz Achimatz Derech HaKikar. Achimatz ran through the plain, Vayavar Sakushi, and he preceded. He arrived in advance of the Kushi. So we see Vayavar means in advance. So Oiver Lasiyasin means the mitzvah is after the bracha. The bracha is Oiver, advances the Asiyah. Abai Amar Mehoch, I have another source. V'hu Avar Lufneim, this was by Yaakov Avinu, in preparation for his greeting Esav. He went before. He stood before the family. Who avar lifnei. So we see that avar is a lashon of imagdim, advancing ahead. Another pshat would be from here. Vayavar Malcolm B'fneim, the Melech Mashiach went ahead of Klal Yisrael, Hashem Baroshim, and Hashem is at their home. So we learn from here that every mitzvah that you do is meant to be preceded with a bracha. Now, why do we precede a mitzvah with a bracha? The Ritva provides two pshatim. It's actually Ritva and Psachim. He says, number one, because through the bracha, the person is miskadish. He elevates himself. He sanctifies himself, which enables him to perform the mitzvah on a higher level. Could you imagine a mitzvah with a bracha versus without a bracha? So the Ritva says it makes sense that you first prepare yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually with that bracha, which enables you to perform the mitzvah on a high level. That's number one. Number two, he says, the mitzvah is avodas hanefesh. It's a more of a spiritual type of service to Hashem. It's verbal, it's emotional, whereas the Maaseh mitzvah is more of a guf type of act. It's more of a physical act. So he says it's roy, it's fitting. Sheyagdim avodas hanefesh lavodas haguf. The mitzvah, which is primarily avodas hanefesh, is more internal, it's more personal, it's more intellectual and emotional. It's connected to one's nefesh. That stands higher in a way than the Maaseh mitzvah, which is a physical Maaseh, and therefore you have to start up at the avodas hanefesh, and that allows you to come down and do the avodas haguf as well. So it's a bracha, avodas hanefesh, and then comes the mitzvah, avodas haguf. Interesting that Tosfos had a kashi here regarding the bracha of mitzvahs lulav. So we learn that the bracha is meant to precede the mitzvah. How do we do that when it comes to shaking lulav? Tosfos brings the Gemara later that as soon as he picks up the lulav, he's already yaitze the mitzvah. So when do we make a bracha? He says it's not mistaver. The bracha will happen when it's still sitting in the kli. It's too far in advance. It doesn't relate to the masa. There's too much of a hefs. It doesn't make sense to make a bracha at that point. So when is it? Once you're holding it, it's too late. So Tosfos towards the end says that perhaps even though he picked it up and he's really yaitze, but he still has the na'anuim to do. And that's considered part and parcel of the mitzvah process, although it's not critical, it's not mi'akev. Once you pick it up, you're really yaitze. The na'anuim are just extra. We learned that the other day, it's just shiur mitzvah, it's ma'akvan and sapuranz, but it's just shiur mitzvah. But still he says, a chiddush, that it's not called gamra mitzvasai until after the nanua. He brings the Gemara later on Mem Aleph about the minhag of Anshe Yerushalayim, who would walk around all day with their lulav. He says that we see lulav as a continuous thing. So technically you're yaitze when you pick it up, but it still has more to it. It's not really completed and finished until the nanuim, until you walk around with it all day. It's an enhanced, he calls it, it's an enhanced kiyum mitzvah. And therefore, Tosfos suggests that you can still make the bracha even after you picked it up and you were yaitze, because you still have more to do. But in the beginning, Tosfos presents two easy solutions to the problem. He says you can just have kavanah not to be yaitze until you decide to be yaitze. So although you're holding it, but I don't want to be yaitze. And even if you hold mitzvah, ein tzarech kavanah to be yaitze. It's not critical to have kavanah. You yaitze automatically, but not when I say I don't want to be yaitze. You can't be yaitze ba'al karcha, he says. That's an easy solution. Just pick up the lulav and esrog, and while you're doing so, have in mind, I'm not going to be yaitze. Make the bracha now. Have a mind to be yaitze. Or another easy solution is turn over the esrog. He brings the Gemara that the mitzvah can only work if it's derech gedei lasan, the way it grows, right? So vertically, straight up. But if it's upside down, it's not the way it grows, and you're not yaitze if you hold it that way. So this is the way I think most people in like this way. They would pick everything up, but turn it upside down while they're saying the bracha, and then turn it back up to be yaitze that mitzvah. Okay, so Abaye was machadish that a bracha before halal is universally accepted. Halal is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, which requires a bracha beforehand. The Mishnah speaks about the bracha after halal, and that indeed is dependent upon minhag hamak. Says the Mishnah, halakech lulav mechaveru v'shvius. It's the 7th year, and he's in Eretz Yisrael. everything has kedusha shvius. He goes over to the lulav esrog merchant who happens to be an Am Ha'aretz, who's not so careful with respect to the halachas of shvius, all kinds of halachas that you need to know, all kinds of limitations and restrictions and time frames. He doesn't know, he's not aware, he's not really too careful with those halachas. So he wishes to purchase a lulav and an esrog and a hadasim and a rabetz from this Am Ha'aretz. What is he meant to do? It says the Mishnah, he tried to convince the dealer to give him the esrog as a gift. Why? Because he cannot purchase the esrog outright from the Am Ha'aretz on Shemitah. Why? Because the Gemara will explain. Okay, so the only solution at this point is have him give it to you as a gift. Apparently the lulav is not a concern, and the Gemara will elaborate on that. The esrog is a concern if purchased. So have him give it as a matana. Says the Gemara, what if the dealer refuses to give it to him as a gift? What do you do now? Amar Rav Huna, there's a way out. Include the esrog price in the lulav price. So double the price of the lulav and include the esrog as well, in which case the esrog technically is being given to you as a gift. So you have no concerns. Okay, so either as a gift or included in the lulav price. Says, well, what's the problem to begin with? What's the concern with actually buying the esrog outright? Why can't he just pay him for the esrog outright? What's wrong with that? Now let's just stop for a second. Tosfos has a kasha. What do you mean, buy an esrog on Shvius? Pasuk says, "V'hoisa Shabbos ha'oretz lachem la'achla." Shvius products are meant for consumption only. You can't deal with Shvius produce. Gemara is a drasha la'achla v'lo l'schera. They're not meant to be used as a commodity. Ask Tosfos, what does the Gemara mean? Buy the esrog. You're not allowed to do business on Shvius. So he says it's not called schir. It's a chiddush in Tosfos. Schir is only when you're wheeling and dealing, using it as a commodity, and you're buying and selling. This fellow happens to have an esrog, and he's selling it pretty much at cost price, or at least close to cost price. He's not really looking to profit. This is not his business, and therefore says Tosfos, there is no concern of schira. So you're not being over on that isser. That explains the Gemara's kasha. Why can't you just buy it outright? Why do you have to gift it or include it? Just buy it outright. Teretz. You're not meant to hand over shvius money, meaning money in exchange for shvius products. You're not meant to give that over to Am Ha'aretz. This time, as we learned in the Brisa, ein moisrin d'mei shvius d'mei peiro shvius l'Am Ha'aretz. Yoser mimazon shalosh sudes. If the money you're giving the Am Ha'aretz is more than 3 meals worth of money, more than he needs to buy 3 meals, then you're not meant to give it to Am Ha'aretz. So let's see Rashi here. Somewhere in the middle of the Amid, beginning with the word Gemara. Says Rashi, Gemara mavliya le'dmei esrog b'lulav. If you can't get it as a matana, have him include the price of the esrog and the price of the lulav. Yimkar lulav b'yoker. You should buy the lulav b'yoker, double the price. Ashiyit le'esrog matana, and have him give him the esrog as a gift. It would seem from Rashi that when he ups the price of the lulav to account for the esrog, in reality the esrog was given as a gift. In the Rambam, it would seem that he's really buying the esrog, but since the esrog money isn't discernible because it's just included, it's behavla in the dmei halulav, and that's not a concern. It's not really called dmei esrog. We find a similar concept by schar Shabbos. You're meant to earn from Shabbos work, but if it's included behavla, it's swallowed into the whole weekly wage. There's no concern of schar Shabbos. So either way, you up the price of the lulav to account for the esrog. Continues Rashi, but what about buying the esrog outright? What could be a concern with that? My time in Rashi, why can't you buy an esrog? What's wrong with giving the Am Ha'aretz shvius money, funds in exchange for shvius fruit? The Answer is because it says in the Torah la'achla, Shvius products are intended for consumption, as opposed to doing business with it. Shekoil perish Shvius chayavan lisbar b'Shvius. Rashi explains all Shvius fruit are meant to be consumed, meant to be eaten on Shvius itself, on site. Not meant to be hoarded, not meant to be profited from. Hein, udmein, the actual fruit, and the money received in exchange for that fruit, which also has kedusha shvius. They're meant to be consumed on shvius itself, as opposed to using it for profiting, to hoard it for after shvius, to get wealthy, to be used as a commodity. No, it's meant to be used as food, to be consumed on site, on shvius itself. The Amei Eretz are suspected of deviating, of misusing Peres Shvius, treating them as commodities. Says Rashi, that doesn't allow us to give them money. To buy Shvius fruit from them. You're presenting a stumbling block in front of the Amei Eretz. You're causing them to transgress, to misuse, to divert Shvius monies for other purposes, for hoarding, for long-term investments. That's not a fulfillment of la'achla. So generally not, except for yosim mazon shalosh sudas, meaning don't give him too much, but if it's only a daily allowance, money that he can use to purchase 3 sudas worth of food, that's considered a daily provision. That's daily use. That's not considered something which can be used, that we have to suspect is being used for long-term investment. Aval mazon gimel moisim kadei chayav, as much as he needs for a day's worth of eating. We can speculate that he needs it for Shabbos. Shabbos needs 3 sudas. Now, we're speaking during the week. Right? How do 3 meals come to play? Says Rashi, because once it has been established that 3 meals are considered a daily provision, we allow that throughout the week as well. We're not machalik. Kivan shuhut be'erev Shabbos, hut l'kol yimei Shabbos. Okay, so in conclusion, you meant to refrain from handing over dmei perish shvius to Amei Eretz, because he might misuse it. He might be planning on investing it and hoarding it, which is not the true fulfillment, the true kiyum of the what shvius fruit was meant for. But if it's within 3 sudas, that's considered daily provision. That's a tzorech hayom, and that you can give him. Oh, so that explains Al Gemara. The lulav doesn't seem to be a concern, as we're going to see later, but the esrog, which was picked on shvius, is kadosh b'kedusha shvius. It's meant to be eaten, consumed now, on Shemitah itself, not meant to be used for long-term investment. And just as the peri itself has kedusha, we're going to learn later in the sugya, the money given in exchange for that fruit also acquires kedusha shvius and has to be consumed that year within the time frame of bir. We're going to see that as well later, that there's a zman bir, which means that you have to consume the shvius produce itself its money, the money received in exchange, which has that kedusha as well. It has to be consumed within the time frame of bir, which means as long as that product is still available out in the field for the animals to eat. So you're limited, and once it's unavailable, you have to go get rid of what you have. So the concept is that Shemitah fruit isn't just a commodity like any other commodity. It's food meant for consumption within the designated time frame. So giving the Amei Eretz money in exchange for his esrog is problematic because he might not fulfill its designation properly. Now Tosfos points out the fact that we don't allow you to give money in exchange for the esrog, apparently we're speaking that this money is more than 3 meals worth of money. He has a kasha in the Mishnah Me'ilah, it's mashma, that an esrog is only worth a pruta. He says, yeah, that's an esrog puzzle, which is meant for achila. Aval hacha, in the words of Tosfos, he says, Aval hacha kasher. We're talking about esrog kasher v'hadar. It's a beautiful esrog. V'hadar lebracha. Dam of yikarim. It's quite expensive. This is a raya to the esrog dealers. So it's more than a pruta. It's more than 3 meals worth. It doesn't have to be $100, but more than 3 meals worth is certainly fair value. Okay, getting back to the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. So in the midst of the Brisa, don't hand Dmei Perishvius Tamaretz. Continues the Brisa, V'mosar, and if he did, what happens if he did it? We apply a penalty. Yoimar. So the one who gave it should say, Harimois halalo, you mechulolin. The money that I gave him should be mechula, meaning the kedusha of that money should be transferred al piros sheyesh li b'teich beisi, on fruit that I have in my home. Uba va'oichlon b'kedusha shvius, then he has to go ahead and eat that fruit with kedusha shvius, fulfilling all the restrictions and limitations that shvius produce has. Says Rashi on top, Uba chaver zeh, this chaver, this erlich person, has to go ahead and eat that fruit as though it's shvius. Va'oichl oisam ha'peres b'kedusha shvius. What exactly is kedusha shvius? Says Rashi, you have to eat it the way it's meant to be eaten. You can't abuse it. You can't destroy it. Achila, v'shtia, v'sicha, v'adlokas haner. Shehein ha'nos ha'motoros ben kedem ha'farish b'sechas shvius. When we speak about kedusha shvius, what we mean is use it properly. Use it the way it's meant to be used. For eating, for drinking, for smearing, and even for lighting an air. Tosfos makes a point of mentioning that this is only a knas because it doesn't really work. At least according to some shittas. Once you've given over the money, it's no longer in your possession. How could you manipulate that kedusha or say, well, that kedusha sitting on the money in the Amaretz, its possession, should get transferred onto something else. It's no longer in your possession to do that. So this says, according to that shita, it would only be a knas, where you give him a penalty for not observing the halachas properly, for handing over money to the Amaretz. He has to go set aside new fruit in exchange of that money. Continues the Brisa. When is this allowance given? Meaning, you're not meant to hand over money to the Amaretz if it's more than shalish sudas, but up until 3 sudas, you're okay. When is that allowed? When you noticed that the Amaretz got his supply of fruit from a sada which was hefker, so the laws of Shemitah were properly observed. In that case, you don't really have grounds for suspicion. You don't really see that he's abusing the Shemitah and the halachas of Shemitah. So in that case, go ahead and give him some money in exchange of that fruit. If you see the Amaretz is neglecting the laws of Shemitah, he brought a supply of fruit from a sada which was mishumar, which was under lock and key. It was guarded. It was not hefker. In that case, you see that he's up to no good. You see he's not keeping the laws of Shemitah. And now there's a chashad that he's going to take your money and hoard it and invest it, not consume it on Shemitah itself. You see he has business interests. You see he's watching his field. He's saving the fruit to profit from them. So although he's selling you just a small amount, well, it's just a ploy. He's doing it incrementally, so it wouldn't be noticeable. Selling a bit here and a bit there, so that it's not obvious that he's actually profiting and dealing with perish shvius. So therefore the Brisa says in that case, you can't even buy a half a isar, small coin, half of that coin's worth of food from him, because he's going to take that money and invest it, and not properly fulfill the mitzvah shvius. Okay, so bottom line is, if you have grounds for suspicion, don't give him any money. Otherwise, up until 3 sudas is okay, but past that is problematic. That explains the halach in the Mishnah. You're not meant to buy the esrog from the Amaretz. Esrog is worth more than 3 sudas of money, and therefore get it as a gift, or at least include it into the price of the lulav. Says the Gemara, Masir Rav Sheshes. Sheshes has a kash. Umina mufkar. When you see the Amaretz bringing the produce from a sada which is hefker, are we still limited? Gimel suudes v'sulai can only hand him 3 meals worth of money and no more. Very many. Listen to this kasha. We're going to have a list of wild growing plants and vegetables which are uncultivated and presumed to be hefker. hafegim, vayarbuzim, vashitim, vachalgugugos, vakuspa shebaharim, which grow in the mountains, which are uncultivated, vakarpas shebenaharis, that grow along the streams, which are uncultivated, vagager shel efer, gager, which grows in the pasture, again, uncultivated, wild-growing plants and vegetables. All these, even though they're roi lachila, they're p'turin min ha'maser, because hefker is not chayiv in maser. Number one. Number two, v'nikachen mikol adam b'shvius. They can be purchased from anybody on Shemitah. Why? Lefisha ein kayetzu ber nishma. We assume that this type of thing is not something which is guarded. It's presumed to be hefker, and you have no reason to suspect that the fellow selling it to you, even though he's an amaretz, had abused the halachas of Shemitah. We assume he just picked it off the forest and give him money in exchange as long as it's within 3 sudas. Sorry, so the Brisa doesn't say anything about 3 sudas. You can buy it without any concerns. Oh, that's a kasha on our Gemara. That sets down a limit of 3 sudas and no more. Just before we continue, it's interesting to point out Tosfos, Rabbi Tam, has a chiddush in the Gemara. He says that Mishumar is Asr Ba'achila. See, Rashi had a different approach. He said when it's Mishumar, then you have grounds for suspicion that this Amaretz is up to no good. He's going to abuse, he's going to misuse, misdirect the fruit or the money received in exchange for that fruit. But the actual fruit itself, according to Rashi, doesn't seem to really be Asr, even though it wasn't Hefker. That doesn't affect the Isra on the actual fruit. You can have the fruit as long as you eat it properly within the prescribed time frame, and like we said before, la'achil v'shtia, use it for its intended function. Tosfos has a chiddush. He says that something which was mishumar on Shemitah, so the halachas of Shemitah were not properly observed, it wasn't left hefker, you cannot have that fruit. It's asur b'achila. So according to Tosfos, when you see it's mishumar, the reason why you can't buy it is because it's asur b'achila. So the straightforward isser, the actual fruit is asur b'achila. Okay, so getting back to this halacha here, when he's coming and offering you something which is uncultivated and presumed to be hefker, you can buy it without any limitations, regardless of how much, regardless of quantity or value. Who moisivla, who mefarakla? Rav Sheshes, who asked this kasha, himself provided an answer. B'chtei man shano. Actually, this brisa was speaking within the 3 suda limitation. That's all. So it is compatible with our brisa earlier. Within 3 sudas you can buy. So man means provision. So 1 day's provision can be purchased because it's a reasonable amount of money you're giving him to buy his daily provision and not to use as investment. We're speaking about 1 day's provision. My mashma dahai mon lishna de mezoinu. Where do we find that mon is something which indicates provision? The king provided to them. He provided them with tzarchei seuda, Rashi says. So we find that mon vayeman is referring to provisions. And here as well, we're speaking about buying the amount of produce which would yield him mamain enough for 3 sudas and no more. Incidentally, we find that Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar referred to the man as man. Pasuk says they didn't know what it was. La yadu, so they called it man. Why man? According to this Gemara, it's very gishmak. Man means provision. You see, the man was an undefined entity. We learned this back in Maseches Yuma that it was all up to the person. It tasted and perhaps even felt according to what you had in mind. So the man was an as yet undefined entity, right? On the receiver's end, it was undefined. So the only way to refer to it is by using the word man. It's a provision. Hashem gave. It's a giving from Hashem, but has yet to be defined by the receiver. Okay, so getting back to our sugya, you may not buy the esrog from the Amoritz because you may not hand him dmei pirush shvius, which he might misuse. But the lulav doesn't seem to be a concern. In fact, the Gemara tells us if you have no other alternative, just include the esrog in the price of the lulav. Says the Gemara, Ihachi. What do you mean? If that's the case, lulav nami. how could you buy the lulav? The lulav also has the same concern. It's Kaddish B'Kedusha Shvius. And by purchasing that lulav from the Amarz, in effect you're giving him money which is Kaddish B'Kedusha Shvius, which he might misuse. Answers the Gemara, no. The lulav is different. Lulav bar shishis, it grew on the 6th year, on Erev Shemitah. Hanichnas l'Shvius, which entered Shemitah, meaning it was picked on Shemitah, in which case it's not Kaddish B'Kedusha Shvius because it primarily grew last year. So lulav doesn't pose a concern. If that's the case, esrog nami. Esrog as well is a bas shishis. It's really a 6th year esrog, hanichnas l'Shvius, which merely entered and was picked on Shemitah. We're speaking about SUKKAH, which is 2 weeks into the 7th year. It must have grown last year. So just as the lulav is not Kaddish, nor is the esrog. Answers the Gemara, no. Esrog is different. Esrog basalakita azlina. The esrog is determined by when it's picked. So unlike other fruit trees, which are determined by when they budded, when they started growing, such as the lulav, which grew last year, we just picked this year, which is not considered Kaddish, the esrog is different. Why is esrog different than any other fruit tree? Let's go down to Rashi. 7 lines from the bottom. It says Rashi, esrog basal akita azlina. The cholok mishari lames. It's very different than other trees. V'dinik yarek. And it's din like a vegetable. Shalchu by basal akita, which follows the point of picking. That determines its status. That establishes, that categorizes the vegetable. You want to know which year to attribute it to? The year that it was picked on. Likewise, the esrog has the same concept. Why, says Rashi? What does the esrog have in common with a vegetable? Mishum de gadol kol mayim. Kedarin b'Rosh Hashanah. You see, unlike a typical fruit tree which just draws its sustenance from natural sources, supplied by the rains, esrog is a delicate item. We had this a couple of days ago. The esrog is something sensitive, delicate. It has to be cultivated and tended to constantly, and as well as being watered constantly for it to properly develop. So it's gadol al kol mayim, not only rainwater, it has to manually be supplied as well. In that respect, it's similar to a vegetable. As the Gemara Rosh Hashanah explains, utzvua v'ilanos, as opposed to grains and other trees, gedelim al mei geshamim. They're sustained by rainwaters. Ve'esrog, on the other hand, is gadol al kol mayim. Shemash k'noisei tamet ki yerek, k'daminim per kama kedush. So when it comes to other fruit trees, we follow the year on which it began to grow. So it's attributed to last year. It began to bud. It got its sap last year. It grew as a result of last year's rain season, right? So it's attributed to last year's season. It's last year's crop. It's last year's product, even though it was picked this year. As opposed to a yerek, or even an esrog, which needs to be tended to, watered constantly for its sustained growth. It doesn't really attribute to last year. It follows the year that it was picked on. Because now you have a fruit. Now you have the pre. If you wouldn't have taken care of it, it wouldn't have developed properly. So it's not really attributed to last year. It's not last year's crop. It has to be constantly cultivated and developed. So it's constantly dependent on your cultivation, on your watering. So it's not attributed to last year's crop. When you pick it, that's what determines its year. So this esrog, which was picked on Shemitah, it's related to Shemitah, and it has Kedusha Shemitah. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom. How could you say that? How can you say that an esrog has Kedusha Shvius just because it was picked today? That's perhaps a svara when it comes to Ma'aser. You see, Trumas and Ma'aser are pre-related halachas. So over there I understand. Typically a fruit tree relates to last year because that's when it began to develop and to bud. It got its sap last year. You know, the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says, Rashi explains that the seraf is oila be'ilan on tesvav. B'shvat, tu b'shvat, that's when its growth is initiated and triggered, and it lived off last year's rain season, so it's connected to last year. Right? It pretty much goes on autopilot. You don't have to take care of it. Last year's sap and rains, and that precipitated its growth. So it's related to last year. It's considered last year's crop, despite the fact that it was picked this year. Right? As opposed to a vegetable, which needs constant watering. Right? If you neglect to water it, what happens to a vegetable? It just dries out and dies out. So it doesn't really relate to the year on which it began to grow. It's not like a fruit tree which is pretty much on autopilot. This one needs to be tended to and watered and sustained all throughout its growth. So until you have the fruit and you picked it, you haven't really determined its status, and it relates to the year on which it was picked. And now you have the pre. It's this year's crop, it's not last year's. And esrog as well, since it has that element, that watering, that manual watering component. So when it comes to maser, we say, it's this year's fruit. It doesn't relate to last year. It's not last year's crop. It wouldn't have grown on its own. You needed to constantly take care of it, and it's an ongoing growth process which doesn't really relate to last year. It relates to the year that it was picked up. Okay. That's because maser is a din on the pre. So it's a question of, is it last year's pre or this year's pre? By the way, what's the nafka meaning? Because every year in Shemitah, every year of the 7-year set of Shemitah has different halachas, right? The first year you do Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni. Second year as well. The third year of Shemitah you go Maser Rishon, Maser Ani. So the dinim revolve and rotate. So that's the nafka mina of knowing. That's the point of figuring out which year, which crop this thing relates to. Right. So if the fruit tree began growing last year, it has last year's maser. Vegetable, based on when it was picked. Esrog, based on when it was picked. It's this year's crop, this year's produce. I understand when it comes to maser, you're going to apply that formula. But when it comes to Shemitah, Kedusha Shemitah, you see, that's not necessarily limited to fruits. You have to leave the land fallow. It's an earth-related mitzvah. Kedusha's karka, Kedusha's haaretz. Right? So when it comes to Shemitah, everybody agrees. That's the Gemara's kasha. Everybody agrees that by Shemitah-related halachas, even the esrog would follow the sh'as chanota when it began to grow, when it began to bud. When the aretz started producing that fruit. And that fruit is like sort of an extension of the aretz. So in that sense, when it comes to Kedushas Aretz, Shemitah, which is earth-related, ground-related, Aretz-related, once the Aretz began producing that fruit on Shemitah, then that fruit has Kedushas Shvius. So it's not dependent upon when you pick the esrog, rather when it began to grow. So how can you say that if somebody buys an esrog 2 weeks into Shemitah, it's problematic? It's Kaddish B'Kedusha Shvius because it was picked on Shemitah. Picking? That doesn't determine the status. It doesn't establish the year. With respect to Shemitah, Shemitah is based on when it began to grow, which is last year. In this case, it began to grow last year. It's last year's crop with respect to Shemitah. It relates to last year's earth, last year's earth, which is not Kaddish. Okay, knowing this, let's see everything inside. 5 lines from the bottom. So, the Gemara concluded that esrog follows likita when it was picked. But that's not meant to be so when it comes to Shemitah. V'habein Rabbi Gamliel, ubein Rabbi Lezer. Both these Amoraim, Ashtanaim, would agree that when it comes to Shemitah, linin shvius, esrog basar chanot azlinan. Even an esrog would follow when it began to bud. This not. The Mishnah says esrog shaval ilan begimel drachim. There are 3 things that an esrog tree has in common with a typical fruit tree. Has one thing in common with vegetables. What are the 3 things that an esrog has in common with a fruit tree? La'arla, you have to observe the 3 years of Arla. Ularavai, the 4th year, the Peres HaKadosh. V'lashvius. So when it comes to determining the year with respect to Kedusha Shvius, just as a fruit tree follows Chanota, the year on which the fruit began to bud, that's what determines their status. So if they began to bud on Shemitah, they're Kaddish. It's irrelevant of when they were picked. Likewise in Esrog. When it comes to Shemitah, it follows the Chanata, the initiation of that growth. And Esrog has one thing in common with vegetables, as we mentioned. The year with respect to Chiyuv and Maser is determined by when it was picked. Divrei Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Esrog shavel ilim l'chol davar. He disagrees. He says, an esrog is just like any other fruit tree. Fact is, it draws sap from the ground. Fact is, it does draw from rainwater, and primarily, it's a naturally occurring thing. You have to add a little of your own, but the ikar, sustenance, comes from the ground. It's a naturally occurring product, and therefore, he says, irrelevant of whether we're speaking about Shemitah or determining the year of Maser, an esrog, like any other fruit tree, follows the year of Chanata when it began, when the growth was triggered. Okay, but in any case, according to Rabbi Gamliel, we find that chiluk. So although when it comes to Maser, an esrog is similar, is equated to a yerek, because it needs that kol mayim, that constant cultivation and tending to. So it's not considered last year's crop. The Maser is determined by when it was picked. But that's when it's a Maser related discussion. A product related discussion. This product isn't last year's product, it's this year's product. Okay, I understand. But when it comes to Shemitah, even Rabbi Gamliel clearly agrees. Shemitah status is determined by when it began to grow. Because that's a karka related issue. That's a Kedushas Haaretz. And the Haaretz began to produce it last year. So what's the issue with the esrog on Shemitah? Why can't you buy the esrog 2 weeks into Shemitah? It's not Kaddish, it's last year's crop. Says the Gemara, you know what? It's actually a third shita. Another shita which will hold that even when it comes to Shemitah, since the esrog needs constant cultivation, it doesn't relate to last year. It's not last year's crop. So if it was picked on Shemitah, it's Kaddish, B'Kedusha Shviyas, and that's the shita of our Mishnah. Hu de Amar Kehatana, our Mishnah follows the following sheet. The Sani, Amar B'Yesi, Abtumus, is the name of a Tana. Hayid, he testified Mishum Chamishas, came name of 5 elders. Esrig Achar Lekita Lemaser. When it comes to Maser, how do you determine the year when it comes to an Esrig? The year on which it was picked. Rabbi Seinu, our rabbis, Nimnu Usha, they took account amongst themselves in the town of Usha, and they decided, they concluded, V'amru, Bein Lemaser, Bein Leshvius. Whether Maser, whether Shvius, it's all the same. Esrig follows Lekita. 1 second, says the Gemara, whoever mentioned Shemitah, why are you inserting Shemitah into the equation? Shvius man dechar shemei. Rabbi Yossi, in the name of Chamisha, he never said Shvius. Why do we respond by saying, well, Shemitah as well? Who discussed Shemitah? Man dechar shemei. And says the Gemara, Chesur mechsra. The Brisa is meant to be learned as though it's missing some words. And we learn it like this. Brisa begins, Esrig achar lekita lamas. When it comes to determining its master status, we follow the picking. Because now you have the pre. This pre relates to this year. However, when it comes to Shvius related discussions, that follows Chanata. That's when the ground began producing this esrog, and if that year was Shemitah, the esrog is Kaddish, irrelevant of when it was picked. So we are drawing that line, that distinction between Maser, which is Lekita, and Shvius, which is Chanata. That's the Tanakama. And our Rabbeim and Usha responded by saying no. They concluded that an esrog is Achar Lekita, Bein Lemaser Ben Shvius. So this is the shita we're looking for. And this is the shita of our Mishnah. Since an esrog is Gadol Kol Mayim, needs to be constantly watered and taken care of, it's not considered last year's crop. It doesn't relate to last year's season, last year's sap, last year's rain season. No. It's an ongoing process. And until you pick it, it's not done. So how do you determine the status of the esrog? Which year, which master is it going to give? Is it Shemitah or not Shemitah? Well, all depends when it was picked. So as Tosfos points out, Shalosh Machlokes l'davar. We actually have 3 shittas when it comes to an esrog. Okay, let's review those 3 shittas. Okay, let's just backtrack a bit. So we discussed the difference between a yarok and an ilan. Now we have 2 applications. We have hilchas of maser, right? Because every year of the Shemitah set, of those 7 years of Shemitah, have different halachas with respect to the chiyuv and maser. Then we have the shaila of whether or not it's kadosh b'kedusha shvius. So when it comes to a vegetable, which needs constant watering, constant cultivation, you follow the lakita. It doesn't really relate to the year that it began to grow. It relates to the year on which it was picked. Now you have the pre. This pre connects to this year with respect to maser, with regard to shvius as well. On the other hand, we have the ilan, typical fruit tree, which draws from the saraf, the sap. It draws from the natural water sources. Last year's rain season is what got it to grow. So that follows chanata, budding, growing. That's what determines its maser and shvius status, irrelevant of when it was picked, because the main growth is attributed to last year. Oh, now we get to the esrog. Now it's tricky. We have 3 shittas. Rabbi Yehuda says, an esrog, like any other fruit tree, its primary growth is stimulated by natural sources, by the sap, by last year's rain season. We don't differentiate. Everything follows chanata, when it began to bud, when it began to grow. So it's last year's crop. Rabbi Gamliel says, I agree when it comes to shvius. That's an earth-related concept. Last year's oretz is what triggered its growth. So when it comes to Shemitah, it's attributed to last year. If last year was Shemitah, the esrog is kaddish. But when it comes to maser, which is a product-related concept, it wasn't a finished product. It was totally dependent upon constant cultivation and watering. You can't say it grew from last year's sustenance, last year's rain season, last year's sap, because it needs constant tending, constant watering. So when it comes to maser, picking is what determines. Now it's a complete product. It's this year's crop, this year's maser. We had a third sheet of Rabbi Yehuda Kessler, which happens to be the Tana of our Mishnah as well. Don't differentiate. They take it the other direction. They say, well, an esrog is so close to a yerek, irrelevant of dini maser or shvius. You follow the lakita, and therefore in our Mishnah you have a esrog which was picked on Shemitah, 2 weeks into Shemitah. So it was mostly grown before Shemitah, but it was picked on Shemitah. It's considered kadosh b'kedusha shvius, which doesn't allow you to hand over the dmei of that esrog, the value of that esrog to Amaretz, because that money has kedusha shvius and has to be consumed properly. Okay, time for a brief chazara of today's daf. We began with doubling psukim with an halal for emphasis and excitement. The bracha before halal was said by all. The bracha after halal is minhag dependent. When it comes to shvius fruit, you're not meant to hand money in exchange for that fruit to an Amaretz. Now, if you see him taking it from a makom mishumer, you see that he is abusing the halachas of Shemitah, you're not meant to hand him anything. But if he's bringing it from a makom which is hefker, then we allow you to give him up to 3 meals worth of money, which can be used for 1 day's provisions. Mishnah tells us if you purchase a lulav and esrog from Amaretz, try to get him to give you the esrog b'matana, or at least include it into the price of the lulav. And the Gemara explains that we're speaking that it was picked on Shemitah. So when it comes to a lulav, an ilan follows the sh'as chanota. Last year is what determines its status. That's when it began to grow, and therefore that lulav picked on Shemitah is not kadosh b'kedusha shvius because its primary growth occurred last year, as opposed to an esrog, which needs to be watered constantly. In that sense, it's like a vegetable, in which case you follow the sh'as likita, and since it was picked on Shemitah, it's considered kadosh b'kedusha shvius. All the best and hatzlacha rabba to you.